Hello, I'm Irina Baker. Welcome to the podcast I Am a Woman of Power, inspiring stories and practical tips on overcoming challenges by going within and connecting with your divine power. In addition, every interview has a complimentary companion podcast practice at radiantmastery.com/practice. I'm here with actually a gorgeous lady. Don't you think that she's gorgeous? Every time I look at her, I think this way. And I spoke to somebody else, the mutual friend, and she said, "Oh, she's so beautiful." I said, "That's right, she's gorgeous." So here we are, Devora Gila, and I will make a pause to pronounce the last name, Berkowitz.
There you go.
All right, very good. Devora Gila helps entrepreneurs get out of stress and overwhelm and into ease and flow so they can make money from a more peaceful, aligned, and empowered place. Hi, Devora.
Hi, Irina.
It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I love talking with you.
Of course, absolutely. I know everybody who's going to watch this and listen to this interview, I think they will start feeling very relaxed because around you there is an aura of being relaxed. So people will feel it, and I'm already relaxing myself.
Oh, that's so
But
sweet. Thank you.
you're welcome. But we're going to talk right now about the challenging situation and first, and then we will go
hmm
deeper and discuss that. So tell us about it.
Well, all I can say is I think I was born a perfectionist and overachiever. And I spent my entire childhood being very, very pressured that I had to do everything right. And I would even cry if I got second place in a contest. And this was a big problem for me. I
That's
went to
tough.
Harvard. Yeah, I
That's
went to
tough to
Harvard. It was
live
a very
like that.
high pressured environment. Um, and it also kind of distanced me from other people because I had that competitive kind of mindset. And I always had this deep feeling that it was never enough. It had to be better. It had to be perfect. So that's where the challenge started.
And that's no place for relaxation. No
Absolutely not.
place, no. You
The
are on a
farthest.
go and go and go. And it feels like you are climbing Everest, but not only just you climbing Everest, you climbing in on skis in a space suit, right?
Yeah, that's pretty good description.
All right. So how did you feel at that time, and how long did it last, by the way?
Well, I do remember being in college on break, and I'm driving down the street with my mom, and we get to a stop sign. And just out of the blue, I said to her, you know, if I don't learn how to be a type B personality by the time I'm 40, I might have a heart attack. And I just said that out of the blue. And as I'll explain a little bit further on, it wasn't too far from the truth. It was a little bit prophetic.
Well, if you said it out of the blue, it had to be prophetic. Something came out
Absolutely.
that was a warning sign because you've done it for years, right? You've been an overachiever for years. You said you've been in the childhood, you grew up this way, then you went
Right.
to Harvard. That's a lot of years.
Absolutely. And then it went on after that. And I'll just fast forward so I don't give you my entire life story. But there was a time when I decided to move to Israel and live a religious life because, maybe I wasn't enough of a good person, right? And so that put a lot of pressure on me as well. And thank God, at this point in my life, I'm not in that same mindset. But at the time, it really did affect every part of my life. And so I got married, I had children, and there was a lot of pressure being a religious Jewish woman living in Israel, wanting to be the perfect mother, the perfect wife, the perfect Jewish woman, right? Really, really too much pressure. And so I remember walking my kids to and from school. We had a car, but I wanted to walk them to school because I wanted to, teach them all about exercise. And then when we got home, we made whole wheat pizzas. And then at bath time, I would teach them. Stopped, and I always had pressure on me to, be the best at everything and make sure my children were the best and perfect children. And that's when that prophecy, started to come true. There was
Hmm.
a big crisis that happened.
Let's talk about before that. So we will leave the crisis for a little bit later. Did you put the pressure on your children and your husband as well, because you were striving to be the best and you said you were teaching your children? Did you put the pressure on them as well?
I never told them that they had to be their best, but I'm sure they got it through my mother's milk, through my
Right,
energy, through just this constant nagging that things had to be a certain way. So they
right.
for sure soaked that up to some
Mm-hmm.
level.
Mm-hmm. And looking back at your life, being overachiever and trying to get to be perfect, you said that you believed, or that was the feeling, that you're never enough, right? That's what you said. You are not
That
enough.
when I look back
Right.
from my
Okay,
perspective
so that's
now.
my question. That's my
Yeah,
question.
yeah.
Exactly. So I wanted to ask, were you aware of it at that time, or it's looking back and you answered it already? So you were not aware of it.
Right, right. It's just the language of not enough kind of came out when I entered the coaching field, because that's, what we talk about, mindset and that kind of thing. At the time, I
What
don't
drove
remember if,
you? What drove
uh,
you?
I think what drives people in general, including myself, is just a sense that something is missing.
Mm-hmm. That's a
You know,
good
a,
point.
cer-
Mm-hmm.
a certain energy that something's missing, something's not satisfied, something doesn't feel right.
Right. So it's a feeling, I had that too, the feeling of unsatisfaction or dissatisfaction. And it's right here. I remember I was teaching at the college at that time, and I was sitting, and I loved my work. I loved everything about it. But the feeling of dissatisfaction was there, saying, not enough. You need to move forward. You need to go to some other place. Is that how you would describe? Did you have that feeling inside, or it
That's
was
interesting.
mental?
That's interesting that you're pointing to that, your chest and your heart, and maybe even the solar plexus, where that personal
Oh, I
power.
distinctly felt it in the heart for some reason.
Ah, okay. So for me, there was like an emptiness in my belly, and I
Hmm.
constantly filled it up. So I had a bit of an eating disorder as well. Um, whether I was trying to fill up with love or satisfaction, whatever it was. So I would say that's where I felt it the most. And it wasn't like words in my mind
Hmm.
saying you're not enough or you're not loved, but just a general feeling of not being connected, I think, not being
And you,
connected to
I'm
something
sure
bigger
you
than
will not
myself.
even feel, you didn't even know that you're not connected, because usually when we are unaware at that time, right, we don't even operate with these words. Later on, you already, from your perspective now, from your Everest, you can
Hmm.
look back and you can clearly see and define it, because you are in this line of work even, and you perfected it in yourself. But at that time, you might not even know that you didn't feel you felt disconnected, right?
I remember the feeling of loneliness.
Lonely.
So,
I wanted to say that. Very good.
mhm.
Yeah. I
and
know
I,
this because I've been there too.
Right. And I remember walking around my house, just walking from room to room, kind of like looking for myself or looking for something to connect to. Um,
Have you experienced this? I remember distinctively this memory. I was standing one time. I was standing in the middle of the crowd, huge crowd. It was some kind of city celebration. It was long time in Russia, long time. I was not aware of any of what I know now. And I felt so lonely. I felt alone in the whole crowd. Everybody's celebrating. And I just felt that strong feeling. I don't even know why I felt it and why I remembered it. So, did you
Hmm.
experience that distinctive feeling of loneliness in the middle of the crowd?
Yeah, I was the person at the school parties that would sit alone with a notebook and write poetry.
Hmm. And you felt
And
lonely?
um, to be
Or you tried
honest,
not to feel?
to be honest, there was a side to me that did find satisfaction in creativity.
Right. Hmm.
And actually, in those situations, I did feel like I had my place, but it was separate from other people, and that was connected back to that sense of competition.
Mm.
Maybe that they weren't even enough for me. It was like just this theme, like something's not enough. We can't connect. I'm saying we can't connect now in my voice from now,
Right,
but
right.
I'm not enough, they're not enough, we're all not enough, basically.
Hmm. Hmm. That's, yeah. Okay, so after all these many years of being in this mode and it's exhausting mode, right?
Hmm.
You tried something traditional, right? I'm
Right.
sure. Something that you needed, you started feeling that you needed to do something, otherwise you would have a heart attack. What did you do? I keep calling
Well,
it traditional ways, like
right.
outside world.
Well, there was a time in my life when I wanted to help myself, and I became a yoga teacher. I did yoga, and I felt it helped me so much that I became a yoga teacher. And there were several years when I thought that I had solved my problems. I thought that I was no longer a stressed out person. In fact, I remember being in Boston and walking down the street. And I was teaching at the time about 13 yoga classes. As any yoga teacher knows, that's way too much. It's a
Way too
lot,
much stretching. Can you believe
way
it?
too
Way
much.
too
And
much
so
stretching.
I was an overachiever yoga teacher, an overachiever yoga teacher, doing too much because it wasn't enough. And I remember there was some construction going on, and there was a loud noise in the background, and I was so relaxed that I just kept walking, and I noticed the sound, but I kept walking. I didn't turn around. So there was a side that I thought I had solved my problem, but then later on I realized that that wasn't enough. That
That wasn't enough.
it takes more than that to really transform yourself. So it was a good start,
How
but
interesting, Devora. It, somebody would say on the outside, and I want to point those little moments that you brilliantly pointed here. You said you started doing yoga and you called it traditional ways. For many people, yoga, they would say, oh, this is the most spiritual approach, right? For people who wake up spiritually, they go to yoga and it's a big leap, right? For something spiritual. And you said you were doing yoga and it didn't help. It was still not enough. So it looks like, of course, I'm sure it was good, right? It was still
oh
good.
yeah,
Yoga was
yeah, yeah.
great. And yet it wasn't what you needed. You needed to go someplace else. And yoga was still outside of yourself. You sort of was doing spiritual work, but not
Hmm.
really. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it was solving some of the problem. It was solving some of the stress. It was solving some of like physiological stress, but it wasn't solving the underlying spiritual existential issue.
Would you say it was solving symptoms, but not the cause?
I would say that, yeah.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And what happened after that? So when you, first of all, how did you realize it's not enough? You just started feeling again this way, or what? Or it was time for next Everest to achieve?
Well, it was when I was a young mother of, or not so young, mother of small children, and and at that point, actually, I stopped doing the yoga. I wasn't finding time to do it, and all of the kind of spiritual tools that I learned with the yoga um, wasn't, they weren't really. They weren't really working because there was something else at play. There was such a strong energy, such a strong tape playing in my head that couldn't override that, or even the Jewish spiritual teachings that I was studying. Nothing was undoing those habits and behaviors that I had. So something else had to happen. Yep.
You got to the point of very difficult or unpleasant result. So tell us about the result. You got to the point of basically you fell apart, right? As I understand.
Right, absolutely. I fell apart. And I remember thinking to myself, I was so busy thinking, I just have to get away for a few days. And that came true. And I found myself in the hospital
You got
because,
away.
yeah,
Oh.
I got away for a few days. I
Mm.
was thinking, I wish someone could take care of me. Well, boy, they took care of me in the hospital. And
Oh,
I was actually going blind in one eye. I was
wow.
coming down with symptoms of a type of multiple sclerosis. And I was almost 40 years old. And that's where that prophecy was almost coming true, only it wasn't my heart, it was my nervous system. It
Mm.
was my nervous system. To be honest with you, if I had kept up the yoga, it might have saved some of that, but I would have had a different kind of what's the word, bottom, uh, rock bottom
It would still
experience.
had to happen. Something would
Something
still
had
had
to
to happen
happen.
because
Something had to
yoga
happen.
was not healing, not changing the cause. Yoga was
Right.
changing the symptoms or helping band-aiding symptoms, basically.
Exactly.
Hmm. Hmm.
Exactly. And so the way I see it is that was the divine's way of stopping me and saying, hey, pay attention.
Stop being
There's something I
stubborn.
have to, yeah, right. I have to tell you something. There's something you need to know.
And you're not seeing something, blindness in the eye, which is
Mm,
totally scary. uh,
mm-hmm.
that's the way of also saying, okay, I don't want to see it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm. And then what was the moment?
Well,
So you're at the hospital,
I'm in the
you're
hospital.
at the end
I'm,
of everything, and then
I'm,
what?
yeah, I'm sitting with the doctor and we're looking at the MRI of my brain and he's pointing out these white spots on my brain and he's saying these are called UBOs. It stands for unidentified bright objects, which is basically demyelination of the nerves,
Oh.
inflammation. And as he's saying UBOs, I'm thinking, oh, there's UFOs flying around in my skull. And as I'm looking at the picture, the photo of the MRI, it finally hit me. At first, I was just looking at this photo, and then I realized that's me. That's inside my head. This is me. And I had that moment of, wow, I really, really hurt myself. And that's when things started to change.
Well, they started to change. They couldn't change without your next step, whatever that was. So what was it? And I'm
Right.
not talking about physical step. What is it? Was it determination of some sort, decision? Something had to, did you talk to yourself? What
So
that
I
next moment?
yeah, so in those next moments, in those next days, I felt like an opening to my connection with the divine. And it was very magical and very special.
I want to go deeper because I think it's so easy for you to say it now because you've been living in this world for so long, right?
Mm,
Divine connection. Imagine for people who don't know, don't understand, they didn't
mhm.
experience it yet. You at the hospital, something had to happen for you to experience that divine connection. How did you get to that moment? And what exactly? How did you experience it? Did it, because it couldn't just, oh, now I have divine connection, right? Makes sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. And maybe I'm a special case. So I had those two things. I had the moment where I said, "Wow, I have to change," and
Good.
what I have
So
what I
during
have
that
found.
moment, what did you say? I just
Right,
want for our viewers to see the process. What did you say at that moment?
right. So just trying to bring the two together. At that
Uh-huh.
moment, I realized that I was facing my relationships all wrong, my relationships to other people, my relationship to myself. And I was working too hard and just trying too hard. And when I talk about feeling that divine kind of spirit, it was like a recognition that I am enough. It was like a voice telling me, you're already enough. You know, maybe it was myself telling myself,
So
you're
it was
already
a
enough.
specific moment.
It was a specific moment when I realized that I didn't have to work so hard. I didn't have to try so hard. I didn't have to destroy myself. And it all kind of came together. Like I realized how it is that um, I wasn't taking care of myself. I wasn't sleeping enough. I wasn't eating right. And I realized I wasn't Superwoman, and I didn't have to um, carry everything on my own, and that I could let go and I could start relaxing. I could start, letting go and letting God, as it were.
Would you say that your ego surrendered at that moment, at least
I
to
think
some
you could
degree?
call it that. I think
Mhm.
that's what they call it.
Well, because the ego, the human side, the ego is the one that who wants to be a superachiever. The
Hmm.
divine inside of us doesn't need you, but the
Exactly.
ego needs. It's the human desire to do something but because of not enough inside.
Yeah, definitely a moment of surrender. Like, wow, I need help here. I need I need to make changes. I need to be shown the way, and I want to make the changes.
How did you ask for help? Did you ask God for help? Did you ask people for help? What happened next?
Yeah, well, I had been working with a mentor, and she has been my mentor for the last 14 years. We're very close. And she started working with me. I hired a bunch of practitioners, a naturopath to help me eat better, a reflexology, a homeopath. I had a whole handful of people in different ways to start getting myself back together. And it was like no holds barred what the kind of help that I was asking to get. I tried to touch every part of my life, the emotional part, the physical part, the spiritual part, so that I was really determined to get better, for my sake and for my family's sake.
Let me confirm this part. What drove you all these years? What have driven you all these years? That was I am not enough. What that was the inner core issue that of course there are more, but was it the core issue that you
Yeah,
believe that
that's
it was?
that's the con- that's the conclusion that I've come to. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. And so in order to change, you had to change that I'm not enough. You had to
Hmm.
come to a realization that you are enough. I am enough.
Absolutely. Hmm.
Hmm. And that's what the transformation that changed the whole structure, whole course of your life, correct?
Yeah, I would agree.
Hmm. Hmm. When you were, I guess, when you were seeking power, well, you were seeking achievement, super achievement, right? Would you say that you were seeking power of some sort?
I don't know if I was seeking power, I was expressing power. And I remember thinking, oh, I don't have to relax. I don't have to rest. I'm Superwoman. I can do everything.
So you
It's
believed
like
you were powerful.
I really did. I believed I didn't need sleep. I believed I
Mhm.
didn't have to take care of myself, that I could just do. And maybe the part that was doing was seeking that, maybe it was seeking that self-acceptance. I mean, I don't know, there's many ways that you could look at it.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm. And when you got to the bottom of in your life, to that moment, how did you feel power wise?
Say again?
How did you feel power wise? Were you feeling still powerful when you got in the hospital, or you felt the opposite? Or
I
you
remember, I
didn't
remember
even pay
feeling
attention?
really, yeah, I remember feeling really grateful. I was actually very, very cheerful because it was a relief. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I can stop. It's like, I don't have to do this anymore because I can see this is not working. And I can see that there's something else meant for me to do, and there's something else for me to be.
So that
And
power that you felt before, that you didn't need to sleep, you could do this stuff, and you can be at Harvard and be a great student and all this stuff and a great mother, that didn't work, basically.
right, that didn't work.
So
I
was it
thought it
really
did, but no,
exactly? And
it
you've
wasn't
been
working.
doing, and it's basically, was it like a, I want to say squirrel, but that's a Russian way to say it. In America, it's the who is on the treadmill?
Oh, the hamster.
The hamster. I
The
forgot about
hamster.
the hamster. I was thinking about squirrel. Squirrel is a
Uh-huh.
Russian saying equivalent to American one. So the hamster on the treadmill. Did you ever feel this way, running into nowhere?
Yeah, absolutely. There was I think there's still a page on my website where I tell the story, and one of the images is a hamster running in a wheel.
Well, now you can add a
Absolutely.
squirrel there too, so people all over the
Right,
world could understand you. Because
right,
squirrel in a circle runs the same way, not on the
right.
treadmill.
Right, because when we have a certain mindset or attitude, we have certain habits and behaviors, and we
Mhm,
just, we seek the familiar. We're comforted by what's familiar to us.
mhm.
Human nature isn't necessarily we want to change. We get stuck in those patterns. So yeah, for
Right,
sure, we feel like a hamster spinning on a wheel.
right, right. So that power, I'm just confirming, didn't work.
No, absolutely not.
No. So it seems like it was a false power, right? It wasn't
Hmm.
really a power because that power brought you to a very bad ending. That means
Yeah.
what kind of power is that?
Right. Yeah. Well, there's all kinds of powers. There's good powers and there's bad powers, and that was
Hmm.
certainly a bad one. I was definitely, um, well, actually, I shouldn't judge it, but it wasn't a power that was bringing me joy. That's for sure. It was not
Hmm.
bringing me health,
Hmm.
and I
You're
was
not
ready
judging
to.
it. We're discussing it for people to
Right.
know and understand and be aware because a lot of people are stuck in feeling hamsters in a treadmill and they don't know how to get out. So that's why we're
Exactly.
discussing this today.
Exactly. And one of the keys of getting out and of those stuck places, as you know, is that sense of non-judgment and acceptance,
Hmm.
having compassion for yourself where you are. And I remember feeling a lot of compassion for myself in that hospital room for where I had ended up. So no, that power was not working for me.
Hmm. Hmm. And now at your place, so how long did it take you to change exactly?
So I think we're always on our soul journey,
Of
and we,
course.
transform. And I'm always going to deeper levels.
Hmm.
Um, but I remember a specific. It was a year where I was uh, working on myself and going to these different practitioners and getting treated. And a year later, I went to have um, my sight tested, or there was somewhere along the line. Actually, I had this leap of faith. I forget when it was. It was less than a year. I had this leap of faith that I could be healed. And it was such a strong faith, and this is kind of getting off the topic, but it was such a strong faith. Um, oh gosh, no, that's not what happened. Let me backtrack. A year later, I went
Hmm.
and I went and I had my my eyes checked, and they told me that they were about 95% better. That's what happened. So this was a year later. It was like 95% better. So I was so happy from that that I said to myself, if my sight could come back, so could the rest of me, because I had all the symptoms of MS. I was very weak and um, you know, depressed and all that. And I remember lying in bed, and at about 4 in the morning, I felt this energy rushing through me, and I woke up the next morning and my symptoms were gone, and I'd had this like miracle healing because of that faith that I could get well. So I just wanted to share that story because
Of
it was such a
course, that's
powerful moment.
beautiful. Yes, that's a very powerful moment. And how long, what brought you this faith? Did you do something for that, or it just came by itself, or how did that faith originate? How did
I,
you
I,
create
th-
it?
I think it was through the powerful work I did with my mentor.
Mhm.
She was there by my side and just holding my hand along this journey during this time, and always reminding me about, what is illness and what is healing. And it's all about getting reconnected to that divine part of yourself, getting reconnected to who you really are, to your true power, you might say. And just hearing her and having these discussions over and over filled me with that faith that it eventually helped me get well.
You mentioned real power. Well, how do you define real power, and what is it for you?
So I believe, and also in my tradition, that we're created in the image of the divine, right? Which I know
That's right.
you relate to that. And
Yes.
so our true power is when we connect to that essence within us, and we become co-creators with the divine. So if we believe that the divine is the source of everything and we were created by the divine, then we can be partners with the divine in anything, any part of our lives that we want to make better. So that true power is really recognizing that we're not just, human beings, but we are divine beings in human form. And when we connect to that knowing, we have true power. We invite the divine into our lives. We invite that if you want to call it the higher power, into your life. 'Cause the divine just wants to give to us, and if we don't make that space, we can't let the divine in. Um, so I hope that makes sense.
It does. How did you before, when you were climbing the Everest when never enough, how did you not let that power, let that divine, how did you block the divine? Would you know? Do you know now, looking back? Of course, you didn't
So
know at that time, but
yeah, at that time
looking
I
back.
didn't know because I thought I was doing all the right things. I was saying all the right prayers. I was doing all the right rituals, but I was doing them for the wrong reasons. I was on that kind of negative power trip that we were talking about before. I
Hmm.
was doing it for the ego, like we mentioned before. And why?
This is
You
a
know,
wonderful moment here.
yeah, so that the ego could protect itself. And why did the ego need to protect itself? Because it had those false beliefs of being not enough.
And you know what else interesting you said? I was doing the prayers. So, and I was doing yoga at the same time. I was
Right.
doing prayers and right rituals. So you could look from outside, oh, you're doing the spiritual work. You're doing the prayer work, right? But it wasn't really spiritual work because it was the ego that was involved in that work.
Right. And who knows and can see through that is the divine, is because, is
Right,
our creator. Our creator knows if our
right.
prayers are coming from the right place. And our creator loves us no matter, where we're at. And our
Mhm.
creator, you know, loves us more than anything. We're just not going to get the results that we might want or the best results in our life unless we come from the right place. And we'll know that. We'll know if we're in the right place by um, well, there's, I guess, different ways of knowing, but if you're truly joyful, if you're truly happy and you feel that sense of inner satisfaction, you'll know if you're doing the right things. And so it's this relationship that we have with the divine. We have to be coming from the right place, and the divine can answer us back by providing us with what we need and helping us feel that satisfaction. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense. I love it.
Good. I
Absolutely.
don't remember what I said.
Well, it's recorded, so good. It's on record. By the way, to get practical tips and awareness shifting activities pertaining to this interview, go to radiantmastery.com/practice to access your complimentary companion podcast practice. You were doing that spiritual work from the ego perspective. When did you realize that something needed to be changed in this case? Meaning not from the ego. How did you find out, and how did you change in that?
Um, so, it was a long spiritual process,
Mm,
from when I got sick, and then that just encouraged me to develop in the different aspects of my life, and the journey is still going. And so I can't really pinpoint a day or a time,
mm-hmm.
but one of the beautiful things of life, and what makes life such a rich experience, is the layers and layers of, if you're conscious, right, if you're doing things with conscious and intention, the layers, and this, like a spiraling upward, in your life in all these levels. So I even recognize now, as I get deeper in my spiritual process, I can see, you know, even now, how today's connection to the divine is even stronger than yesterday's. And it's just a continually developing process.
Do you ever get disconnected?
Oh, sure. So,
And how does it feel? How do you know, for the viewers, how would you
yeah.
know that you're disconnected?
Yeah. So there's a couple ways of describing this. Um, so when mentally I'm in negative thoughts, or if I am in negative emotion, or make it, choose not to come out of negative emotion, get back into that ego, because that happens too. There's a part of all of us that's a little bratty child that doesn't want to
Mm-hmm.
listen. So when that shows up, I feel very disconnected, and I realize that too.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't feel
And
good,
no,
right?
it's not a good feeling, and it's
Yeah.
really good to have self-awareness of when you're in that place. And again, life is a journey, and we're meant to have this, what we call in my tradition, a moving towards, and like a running away and a moving towards. Sometimes we just want to run away from thinking the right thought, or doing the right thing, and then we want to return. It's like, oh, that didn't feel good. Okay, I want to be I want to be more whole. I want to feel more connected. So just as a part of being human, that's just a part of normal life. It's not like, we're uh, necessarily like an extreme, but just observing yourself on a day-to-day basis and see where you are. And there could be days where everything just goes really smoothly, and there can be days where nothing's going smoothly, and there can be days where it's a mixture of everything, and it's all the human journey.
Right. From the old times, so if you will look back at where you were and where you came, if you didn't, if you decided not to heal that, not to go inside, and not to heal that part that was screaming at you, I'm not enough, you didn't go inside, you didn't heal it, what would happen? Where would you be here now?
Oh, I don't want to think about that, Irina.
I know, just shortly, briefly. Sure.
I certainly wouldn't be as satisfied as I feel now, with my life. I'd probably be feel very ill. Um, I might have more than one disability, because our physical health really is a reflection of our emotional and spiritual health.
Hmm. And you would continue being a hamster.
At what?
And you would continue being a hamster
Right,
on the
I would
treadmill.
continue being that squirrel, that
A
hamster.
squirrel
Right,
with a
absolutely.
bushy tail. To hear more inspiring stories and practical tips on overcoming your challenges by going within and connecting with your divine power, make sure to subscribe to this channel. I asked it because some people make that choice, right? They want to, they don't deal with their internal side. They just want to continue taking outside actions, physical actions, and they keep running away, or being on that treadmill and never look back, never look inside.
That's right.
So
That's right.
that's why it's a reminder to people that if you continue doing what you're doing, or continuing taking just physical actions and never pay attention to the inner world and not looking inside and see what's there that caused any of your problems or dissatisfaction, then the problem will not be solved.
I absolutely agree. Yeah, you can't solve your problem unless you do your inner work. That's just how I believe that's how the divine designed the universe, because ultimately, um, what I have found in my own life is the more I work on myself, the more satisfaction I have, the closer I feel to my divine source, and just the better life is. And if the divine is like our parent, we can understand that, because we as parents, we want our children to have the best lives that they can. The same thing with the divine. The divine wants us also to have the best life that we can.
And the child has to make a choice. Because if
E-
the child wants
Exactly.
donuts all the time, then that's a bad choice the child is making, even though the parent doesn't want to buy those donuts, right?
Right. And the parent also can't enable the child and do everything for the child. So you can't like keep dressing your 21-year-old and making his bed. So we do have that choice. Like the divine cannot do everything for us. We have that choice so that we can create that relationship with the divine and have that deep inner connection with ourselves.
So do you think that the choice is important?
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about the choices that we make.
So that's what you made, that choice at that point, and then realization came, right?
Yeah,
Because you had to do something inside for
right.
realization to
I made the
appear.
decision. Yeah, I made the decision that I had to make some inner changes of how I looked at myself and my life and my relationships, and I had to do something about it, not something physical, like you said, but I had to start relating to myself and my life differently. And that's an inner journey. That's an inner change. That's an inner process.
Hmm. And perhaps that choice was not really pronounced. You didn't stand on some pedestal and announce it to the world, this is my choice, right? We don't do that. But now
Right.
looking back, in other words, the choice has to come from inside. It's not
Yes.
even conscious to me, because if consciously you want to say, oh, I'm fine, I'm making that choice, if you're not ready inside, you're not going to change, right? It has
Yeah.
to come from inside. So that choice has to come from inside. Do you agree?
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that. And it's a combination of desire and intention and
Mm-hmm.
willpower. And it comes from a deep place in the soul that you express through your actions. So for me, that deep desire to change came from my soul. And then I expressed it through the actions of hiring a coach and working with my
Right,
mentor and
right.
so on. So,
So the soul decision was first, primary. The
mm-hmm.
soul has decided, and soul to me is the in subconscious mind. It's not conscious because it's inside. That's the inner world. And then it was transferred or channeled into the human actions, the ego actions. So the soul and the ego had to be aligned together. But the soul decision came first, and then the ego followed. Then you hired everybody and you got help and you did. But the process was directed or guided by the internal source.
Exactly, exactly. And you have to be willing to connect to that soul part of yourself in order to make that happen. For those people who have difficulty connecting, finding that place, sometimes all it takes is a little bit of wanting, a little a little yearning, and then the divine answers. Um, the divine answers that cry help, just like a prayer. You know, how many times have you prayed for something with sincerity and you saw it happen? So even just a little bit of yearning to connect to your soul is so powerful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In conclusion, where are you right now? What is, from all looking back at where you were, where are you right now?
Oh, wow. So that's a great question. So where am I right now? So when it comes to feeling not enough, so that feels like it's transformed into something completely different. There's a sense of wanting more, which is not the same as not enough. There's a sense that I am enough who I am, that I came to this earth pre-loved, that I came to this earth, you know, unique and special, and there's only one of me, uh, you know, as is everybody else. And I'm enough because I was created in the divine image.
Mm-hmm.
And the divine loves me as loves you and everybody else. And there's a sense of not enough in a positive way, kind of like um, making turning around that negative into something that is more of service, wanting more, wanting um, uh, just to um, have an expression of my life that's the most um, beautiful or satisfying as possible. And so that inner drive, it hasn't gone away. It's more channeled into a more beautiful way of being. Because I'll always be a person who likes to move forward, but it's in a way that um, is just more pleasurable and more satisfying than the driven that I was before.
Right. And more relaxed and aligned, right?
More relaxed, aligned, connected, inspired, empowered.
Mm-hmm. So here's the distinct, very clear distinction, I would say, from the bad power or negative power or aggressive power
Right, or
before.
unhelpful power.
All right. And it's the power of the human, just the human who is disconnected, very alone, feeling lonely, and it wants to survive in the world, right? Because why were you super achieving, so to speak? Because you needed to survive in the world and be comfortable in the world, right? It's the
Yeah.
physical, these are physical
Hmm.
desires. Versus now, it's not driven, you are not driven by that aggressive power of survival in the world. You're now driven in service. You have the mission to help others. You're driven because the soul is a natural desire for the soul to grow. So it's the growth. It's not the driven hamster on a treadmill running around. It's the
Yes,
soul growth. That's,
exactly.
and
The
we grow
growth.
through physical actions in the world, because once you express yourself, once you express your creativity, your action, you take actions, you're growing. Your soul is growing.
Exactly. The growing of the soul. Those were the words I was looking for.
Hmm.
Exactly.
Hmm. And it's a beautiful place to be in.
Yes.
So, looking at all this experience, can you say I'm a woman of power?
I am a woman of power.
How does that feel?
Great.
Feels good.
Let's say it together. Ready?
Let's say it together.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. I
I
am a
am
woman
woman of
of
power.
power.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Feels good, isn't it? Doesn't it?
Yeah, I like doing that together. There's like sisterhood.
You know what? Let's do it again. I know you like it slowly now, I know. So we'll do it slowly, and whoever watches us, let's do it together. Ready?
Ready?
I
I
am
am
a
a
woman
woman
of
of
power.
power.
I think it's a little bit of difference in Zoom in our video recording. That's why
Okay,
it's a little bit not together, but that's okay. We got it. We got it.
great.
And it feels good. Yes. Well, it's time for us to wrap up. It was very interesting, very insightful, and actually I have relaxed as I promised I would. So, tell us what gift do you have for our viewers, for our listeners? So what would you like to share with us?
So I have a gift of my 4 steps for ease and flow that I love to share with you. And it's going to help you move forward so that you can feel more balanced and grounded, feel more relaxed. If you're someone who wants to have more time for yourself, if you want to feel more energetic and be healthier, just these 4 steps that I go through and bring my clients through to have more ease and flow in your life, work, or business. And you can find that on my website.
Please tell us what your website, and it will be in the captions as well, but please tell us.
So that's my name. So it's devoragilaberkowitz.com.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Devora. It's a pleasure to have you here and pleasure to hear your story and the insights that came out of it. If you didn't live it through and you didn't come out of it as a success story, we wouldn't benefit from it, right?
Thank you so much, Irina, for having me. I enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you, Devora. Everybody, I am a woman of power, helping women to awaken to and connect with your internal inner power. Thank you so much and have a great day. Remember to get practical tips and awareness shifting activities pertaining to this interview. Go to radiantmastery.com/practice to access your complimentary companion podcast practice. To hear more inspiring stories and practical tips on overcoming your challenges by going within and connecting with your divine power, make sure to subscribe to this channel.